Welcome to the deep dive. Today, well, we're tackling something pretty intense. It's about making those really tough, high-stakes decisions. When you don't have all the facts, maybe the ethics are a bit murky, and time is definitely not on your side. We're unpacking resilient leadership, how you can face down adversity and maybe even use it to get stronger. Think of this as like your essential guide for keeping command when things get rough.
Exactly. And our goal here is pretty straightforward. Give you a direct path to better crisis leadership. We've looked at material that takes frameworks originally from military contexts and adapts them, makes them relevant for today's business world, And we're centering it all around a really powerful story, Captain Ed Freeman at the Battle of Ayadrang. It's more than just inspiration. It's our core example of how you find clarity when everything's chaotic.
Let's define the challenge first. When we say adversity here, we're not just talking about like a bad quarter financially. The research we looked at really emphasizes true crisis situations, deep uncertainty, and sometimes real moral quandaries that test what you stand for as a leader. And you have to acknowledge the human side, right? The sheer emotional weight of making calls that impact people's lives, maybe even the whole organization's future.
Absolutely. That psychological pressure, it's often the first thing to crack when the stakes are that high, existential even. And Captain Freeman's story from 65, it's just such a clear picture of overcoming that exact pressure. For anyone who doesn't know it, during Ayadrang, a really brutal battle, U.S. troops were cut off, low on ammo, needing medevac desperately. Command essentially said the landing zone was too dangerous, too hot to fly into. But Freeman, he flew his helicopter in anyway, wasn't even armored, over and over under intense fire to rescue wounded soldiers.
14 times. He flew in 14 times, knowing he was disobeying orders, because he felt it was the right thing to do, a moral imperative. And that kind of extreme, repeated bravery, it really anchors this whole idea of resilient leadership. It wasn't just a random act. There was a kind of structure behind his decision, even if it felt purely instinctive in the moment.
That's right. And that leads us straight into the first big framework we pulled out. We can actually break down the components that shaped his decision-making then. It wasn't just guts. It was a specific mix of cognitive and moral factors.
Okay, so what were they? What were those key drivers?
Well, first, incredible situational awareness. And that's not just seeing the bullets flying, it's understanding the bigger picture, the real risk versus the consequence of not acting. He knew those soldiers would die without help. That calculation was key. Second, moral clarity. Just absolute commitment to his fellow soldiers. It overrode basic self-preservation. His purpose was crystal clear. And third, risk acceptance. He didn't ignore the danger, he consciously accepted it and chose to act anyway, a deliberate choice.
Okay, so awareness, clarity, and acceptance. Those informed his actions. How do we translate that into like a practical tool for a leader facing a crisis today? Yeah, something actionable.
That's where the Freeman Framework comes in. It's designed as a 3-step process for quick action, right when you need it most. It helps cut through the noise, the panic.
All right, walk us through those 3 steps.
Step 1. Assess quickly. No time for endless meetings. You need a rapid scan of the situation. What are the constraints? What's the most urgent need right now? Look for the leverage points. Step 2. Act decisively. This one's critical. Make a choice and commit to it. Execute immediately. Analysis paralysis can be fatal in a crisis. A flawed decision executed now is often better than a perfect one too late.
And the 3rd step, that connects back to Freeman's drive, right?
Yeah. Yes, that's anchor in purpose. You explicitly link your action back to the core mission or the fundamental values of your organization. So, in business, maybe that's saving a key client relationship or protecting data integrity, or maybe ensuring the company survives long-term, even if it means some painful short-term steps. When leaders do that, their teams get the why. They understand the reason behind the difficult actions.
Okay, so that framework gives structure for the outward action. But, before you can assess or act effectively, you have to deal with your own internal reaction, right? The stress, the fear. These decisions are incredibly taxing. This is where emotional intelligence, EQ, seems crucial.
Oh, absolutely essential.
Yeah.
The research calls EQ a resilience multiplier. It amplifies everything else. Think about it, a brilliant strategist who's visibly falling apart under pressure. They're not leading anyone effectively. If your internal state is shot, then all those frameworks, Freeman, OODA Loop, whatever, they just fall apart because panic takes over.
So let's get practical. The source material mentions specific techniques for managing that fear and uncertainty in the moment. What kind of internal coping strategies are we talking about?
Yeah, the focus is on things you can do quickly, simple interventions. One big one is controlled breathing. sometimes called tactical breathing or box breathing. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. It sounds basic, but it physically interrupts that fight or flight response from your limbic system. It forces your thinking brain, your prefrontal cortex, back online so you can analyze instead of just reacting.
Okay, that handles the physical stress response. What about the mental side, that feeling of being overwhelmed, like it's all going wrong?
That's about cognitive reframing, shifting your internal narrative. So instead of thinking, oh God, this is a catastrophe, we're doomed, you train yourself to ask a different question, like, what's the single most important thing I can do right now in the next minute? It pulls your focus from the huge, maybe paralyzing consequences down to immediate, manageable actions. It's about finding small wins under pressure to regain that sense of control, of agency.
Right. So you get yourself internally stable, the resilience multiplier kicks in. Then what structures do you lean on? This seems to be where those military models, adapted for business, become really useful.
Exactly. So alongside the speed and intuition of something like the Freeman Framework, you need these more structured approaches. Probably the most famous is the OODA Loop: observe, orient, decide, act. It was developed by Colonel John Boyd. It's all about creating a rapid cycle to adapt and react faster than whatever crisis or competitor you're facing.
Can you break that down quickly for us, the OODA loop?
Sure, think of it like a continuous cycle, a flywheel. Observe. You gather data, see what's happening. Orient. This is the crucial part. You make sense of that data based on your context, your experience, your mental models. Decide. You choose a course of action, a strategy. And act. You execute it. The whole point is to cycle through that loop faster and more effectively than the situation is changing, or faster than your opponent. You want them reacting to you.
Okay, ODO focuses on speed and reaction.
Yeah.
But a lot of modern crises are just confusing, right? Sometimes you don't even know what the rules are anymore.
Yeah, and that's exactly why the second model discussed is so important, the VUCA response matrix. VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Pretty much defines many modern crises. The matrix gives you a specific leadership approach for each one of those conditions.
Okay, let's unpack VUCA because those are terms we hear a lot. What's the response for each?
Right. So for volatility, things changing fast and unpredictably, the response is vision. A clear, steady purpose helps stabilize things. For uncertainty, when you lack information, the response is understanding. You need rapid information gathering, sense-making, sharing knowledge quickly. For complexity, just too many interconnected parts, hard to track the response, is clarity. You simplify where possible, use clear processes, direct communication. And for ambiguity, where you're not even sure what the real problem is, the response is agility. You need to experiment, pivot quickly, accept that the first plan might need to change.
That gives you a way to structure your thinking in chaos. But the research also talked about this balance, right? Between that intuitive gut reaction and these analytical frameworks. Isn't just going with your gut sometimes dangerous in a crisis?
It definitely can be, yeah, if the gut isn't trained or informed. But the insight here is interesting. Great intuitive decision-making isn't just random guessing. It's often years of experience compressed into pattern recognition. So these models, OODA, VUCA, Freeman, they're like the training. They build the mental muscles, the structures. So when the pressure hits, your gut instinct is faster, more reliable because it's drawing on that internalized structure, not just raw panic.
And the sources made it clear these aren't just abstract ideas. They apply directly to business situations. Can you give an example?
Yeah.
How might the OODA loop work in, say, a big PR mess?
Okay, imagine a really damaging story goes viral on social media about your company. You observe. Track how fast it's spreading, who's reacting, what the sentiment is. You orient. Put this in context. How does this compare to past incidents? What are our legal risks? What's our brand position? You decide. What's the strategy? Apologize immediately. Issue a holding statement while investigating. Correct misinformation. Then you act. Release the statement, brief internal teams, respond on social channels, and the speed of that loop is vital. If you take 24 hours to observe and orient, the narrative has already been set by others. You're playing catch-up.
That makes sense. And it leads us nicely from the internal decision-making to the external impact. We need to talk about that visible aspect of leadership leading from the front, like Captain Freeman literally putting himself out there. What does that kind of visibility really do for a team in crisis?
Fundamentally, it builds or rebuilds trust. When things are uncertain, people naturally get scared, confidence drops. If a leader seems to be hiding or blaming others or just delegating all the hard stuff, it signals weakness. It makes people doubt the organization can pull through. But seeing the leader visibly engaged, committed, sharing the burden like Freeman flying those missions, it's a powerful stabilizing force. It becomes a symbol that, okay, we're in this together, we have direction.
What specific behaviors build that trust during tough times? The research pointed to a few key things.
Yeah, three main pillars came up repeatedly. First, transparency. Share information openly and honestly as much as you possibly can, even the bad news, because silence breeds fear and rumor. Second, consistency. Your message needs to be consistent across different channels, and your actions need to match your words. If they don't align, trust evaporates instantly. And third, real empathy. Leaders have to acknowledge the difficulty people are facing, whether it's just the stress of long hours or the genuine pain if layoffs are involved. People need to feel seen and understood.
Right. And transparency and empathy aren't just nice-to-haves, they're vital communication strategies. Especially when you're making tough calls based on something like the Freeman Framework, calls that might have negative consequences for some. Leading from the front isn't about pretending you have all the answers, is it? It's about showing you're committed to navigating the storm with the team.
Exactly. If the team sees the leader absorbing some of the pressure, taking accountability, and sticking to those core principles or purpose, it gives them confidence. It reassures them that the organization's values still mean something, even when things are hard. That helps everyone weather the storm.
Okay, so we've covered preparing for a crisis, making decisions in the crisis, and leading through it. Now let's shift focus slightly. How do we make sure we actually learn from adversity, turn it into growth? Because just surviving isn't really the goal, right? It's about getting better because of it.
That's a critical final piece. If you just kind of stumble out of a crisis, breathe a sigh of relief, and go back to business as usual, you've wasted a huge learning opportunity. A very expensive one, usually. The systems, the processes, maybe even the culture they often need to change. The source material lays out a structured way to debrief and learn. They call it the resilience debrief model.
Okay, resilience debrief sounds more formal than just a quick chat about what went wrong. What are the phases?
It's a three-phase process. First is reflect. This is about getting an objective, clear-eyed view of what actually happened. What were the key events? What decisions were made? Maybe map them against the Freeman Framework. What was the intended outcome? What really happened? The key here is factual honesty, trying to avoid blame initially. Just get the data points down.
Okay, reflect first. Then what? The second phase sounds like the tricky one. Reframe. How do you turn something potentially traumatic into learning?
Yeah, reframe is often the hardest emotionally, but maybe the most valuable intellectually. It means looking for the unexpected positives. Maybe a team stepped up in a surprising way, or an innovation emerged under pressure. But more importantly, it means honestly identifying the vulnerabilities the crisis exposed. Was our communication plan flawed? Was the supply chain too fragile? Did we lack certain skills? You reframe the negative event not just as a failure, but as, well, very expensive feedback on where you need to improve. It's diagnostic.
That makes a lot of sense, turning pain into insight. And the final step, making it concrete.
Exactly. The third phase is rebuild. This is where you translate the lessons from reflect and reframe into actual changes. Maybe you update your crisis training based on where your OODA Loop broke down. Maybe you establish new communication protocols for better transparency and consistency. Perhaps you redesign processes to build in more buffers or redundancies. The end goal, for you as a leader listening to this, is to use this process to build out your own personal leadership adversity playbook. You take the inspiration from Freeman's legacy, you use these frameworks, and you prepare yourself better for the next time adversity strikes. Because it probably will.
All right, let's try to wrap this up with the absolute key takeaways for you to hold on to. Resilient leadership needs both structure for action and mastery over your internal state. For that immediate high-pressure moment, remember the Freeman Framework. Assess quickly. Act decisively, anchor in purpose.
And remember that your internal state, your EQ, is the foundation. Emotional intelligence is that resilience multiplier. It allows you to actually use the tactical models like the OODA Loop and the VUCA response matrix when you need them most instead of freezing up.
And finally, don't waste the crisis. Make learning systematic. Use that three-phase resilience debrief model. Reflect on what happened. Reframe it to find the lessons. And rebuild your approach to be stronger next time.
And maybe just one final thought for you to chew on, building on all this. Captain Freeman's situation, while incredibly dangerous, had a stark moral clarity. Saving lives was the undisputed purpose guiding him. Now, think about applying these powerful frameworks, assess, act, anchor, to the complex, often murky ethical waters of a modern business crisis. You might have conflicting duties to shareholders, employees, customers, the wider community. How do you ensure that anchoring in purpose truly remains an ethical compass, not just a way to justify a difficult decision? That's the ongoing challenge, the really hard work of resilient leadership today.